Starting off this countdown, we have I Know What You Did Last Summer. The 1997 film starring Jennifer Love Hewitt, Sarah Michelle Gellar, and Freddie Prinze Jr., among others, is a classic slasher film. It surrounds 4 young friends who get stalked by a crazy killer with a hook. The film draws inspiration from the urban legend, The Hook, which has terrified kids for ages. The Hook or Hook Man is an urban legend about a killer with a hook for a hand that attacks couples in parked cars. Now, over the years, this urban legend has changed a number of times, but the main concept is that a couple go out to a place in the woods called Lover's Lane. While cuddling and doing other things, an announcement comes on the radio. It says a prisoner has escaped an asylum and is on the run. He is a known killer who they call the Hook Man because he lost his hand in an accident and replaced it with a hook. Just as this announcement finishes, they hear scraping on the side of the car. The girl is so freaked out that she begs her boyfriend to just drive them home, even though he thinks it's just nothing. Then they arrive home and they notice a bloody hook lodged into the side of their car. Of course, this is just an urban legend, but it may have some roots in real life, like the 1946 Texarkana Moonlight Murders. Basically a series of murders and attacks on young people parked on lovers' lanes in Texas. The killer has never been caught. People were afraid that these were done by the Hook Man, and that the legend came to life. But in reality, the Hook Man is just one big urban legend and won't come after you or your friends. In our 4th spot, we have Mothman. Chances are you have probably heard of this urban legend. The Mothman originates from West Virginia folklore. Apparently, the Mothman is a large 10-foot tall gray creature with red glowing eyes and wings. On November 15th, 1966, 2 young couples called the police to report this creature. They said that this large flying man was following their car while they were driving. During the next few days, more and more people reported similar things. The 2002 film The Mothman Prophecies is based off of the 1975 book by the same name. In the film, a reporter is investigating the legend of the Mothman, and it's based on the actual sightings of Mothman that I just discussed. I mean, there's no solid evidence proving that the Mothman is real, so for now, it's just an urban legend. But who knows? Maybe in the future we will learn about these creepy sightings and discover what or who was behind them. Coming in at number 3, we have the Candyman. The Candyman was an urban legend based off of a short story by Clive Barker, which eventually got turned into a movie. Basically, legend states that if you look in the mirror and chant his name 5 times, then you will summon him, and he will appear in the mirror. Similar to, Bloody Mary. The movie and legend scared many when they found out something similar happened to a woman. In 1987, a woman named Ruth McCoy was found dead after 2 men climbed through her medicine cabinet and shot her. The film was inspired by the method of killing and incorporated that into the film. In the film, you see the man with a hook appear through the medicine cabinet / mirror and try to slash people to death. Ruth's death had a lot of people scared. When Candyman featured the medicine cabinet scene in their film, it made them even more scared, making people think that, oh damn, killers can enter my house through the connecting wall and through the medicine cabinet. Not only that, but this whole thing had people believing that the Candyman was real. In our 2nd spot, we have Alligators in the Sewers. The 1980 horror sci-fi movie Alligators in the Sewers is about a flushed away alligator that turns into this massive mutant gator. In the film, the gator gets flushed and ends up living in the sewers. From there, it eats the bodies of small animals. But these animals have been used for scientific experiments, and by eating them, it caused the gator to grow into this massive creature. Then it starts terrorizing the city. Of course, there is an urban legend very similar to the movie. It's probably what the movie was inspired by. Legend goes that a New York couple brought back baby alligators while vacationing in Florida. Eventually, they flushed these gators down the toilet, and the gators made a family of their own in the sewers under the city. Then legend goes that one time a boy was reaching for his baseball that rolled into the sewer grate, and an alligator bit off his arm. Now, let's look at the facts here. This legend and movie had people really believing that alligators could survive in sewers. But here's the thing. Alligators are cold-blooded animals, meaning they can't regulate their own body temperature. In order for them to survive, they need to warm their bodies by the hot sun or a heat lamp. And I mean, I don't think there are heat lamps down there in the sewers, okay? And there's definitely no exposure to sunlight. Without the warmth of the sun, the alligators would eventually die. Also, New York winters can be pretty harsh. They would end up just freezing to death down there. Now, if for some reason they did survive, the polluted water would certainly kill them off. They can't live long in salmonella or E. coli, which is found in the sewage. And in our number 1 spot, we have The Dead Man's Curve. This 1998 film starring Matthew Lillard, who I love, is about 2 college students who discover that if their roommate takes his own life, then the college will bump up their grades out of sympathy. So they plan to kill their roommate and make it look like a Hate to break it to you, but I don't think colleges are allowed to do that. Either way, this movie gave birth to this urban legend. People really thought that a death could get them straight A's. Other versions of the legend say that the roommate doesn't have to commit suicide, but the school will grant them good grades if their roommate is murdered, or if they suffered from an illness and then they died as a result of that. Another variation says that the death must occur in the room or with the roommate. And a student who does not witness his roommate's death only receives a 3.4 average. Honestly, either way, it's just pretty messed up. But it had a lot of people thinking that it was real. Hate to break it to you, but it's not. So keep on studying and earn your grades that way.
Coming in at number 5, the Dog Boy. Hailing from Arkansas, the legend of the Dog Boy is one of the most infamous around the state. In 1954, Gerald Floyd Bettis, born to parents Floyd and Eileen Bettis in the Bettis house, during his early years, locals would say that the boy would catch dogs and cats and keep them in his home. However, what he was doing with these animals was absolutely horrific. However, what he was known for was the treatment of his parents. It was said that he imprisoned them in the attic, keeping them in there for years. According to reports, he abused them, but he wasn't arrested for it until after the death of his father and the continued abuse of his mother. He ultimately died in prison of an overdose, but since then people have claimed that paranormal goings-on have occurred at the former home. Flickering lights, strange noises, and moving objects have all been reported over the years. In some versions of the legend, his ghost walks on all fours and is shaggy like a dog, while in other versions he appears as a towering man donning a brown jacket and a bow tie. Coming in at number 4, we have Dudley Town. Dudley Town is an abandoned settlement in Connecticut in the United States, more commonly referred to today as Ghost Town. Since the mid-1920s, the land occupied by the village has been maintained. However, due to vandalism and trespassers, the site is no longer open to the public. Now, some history before we get into the nitty-gritty of this legend. Dudley Town was never an actual town. The name was actually given to the portion of Cornwall that included several members of the Dudley family. A local rumor has since circulated online that alleges that the founders of Dudley Town were descended from Edmund Dudley, an English nobleman who was beheaded for treason during the reign of Henry VIII. From that moment on, the Dudley family was placed under a curse which followed them to America. This curse is what was ultimately blamed for instances of crop failures and mental illness in the village. On top of that, Dudley Town visitors also report seeing paranormal phenomena such as an unnerving lack of wildlife, floating orbs of light, and sinister wolf-like black shadows. Not only that, but there is also said to be a mysterious group in the area called the Dark Forest Association that is said to police the grounds with militant force. What exactly is going on in Dudley Town? I don't really want to know. Coming in at number 3, we have the Alaska Triangle. Sometimes referred to as Alaska's Bermuda Triangle, this is a place in the untouched wilderness where people have reportedly been disappearing for years now. The triangle itself connects Anchorage, where I used to live, in the south to Juneau in the southeast panhandle, to Barrow, the northernmost town in Alaska. The area in between those points is unforgiving and a place not for the faint-hearted or inexperienced. Now, the area itself began to attract attention back in the 1970s, when a small plane carrying US House Majority Leader Hale Boggs, Alaska Congressman Nick Begich, and an aide Russell Brown vanished into thin air while flying from Anchorage to Juneau. For a month after the initial disappearance, planes, military aircraft, and dozens of boats scoured the area searching for the plane. However, nothing was ever discovered. No debris, no wreckage, nothing. Following the disappearance, more and more planes began to disappear, and on top of that, hikers also began to vanish into thin air. Since 1988, it is said that more than 16,000 people have disappeared in the Alaska Triangle, which is more than twice the national average. Now, whether this is something supernatural, extraterrestrial, or simply cruel weather conditions and harsh wilderness, we don't know. However, the disappearances have been blamed on everything from aliens to energy vortexes to shape-shifting demons. However, the likely explanation is the wilderness itself. It can be truly unforgiving, and Alaska is big, most of it is untouched wilderness. Lots of bears to eat ya. Coming in at number 2, we have the Alice killings. To this very day, the Alice killings remain one of the most bizarre and unsolvable serial killings in Japan's history. Between the years of 1999 to 2005, a series of killings supposedly took place. Killings that were completely different and unrelated except for one common element, a calling card that the killer left behind each time. He would leave behind a playing card, which varied from killing to killing. It would be left at each scene in an obvious location, and on the card would read Alice written in the victim's blood. According to the legend, the first victim of Alice killings was Sasaki Megumi. She was a 29-year-old restaurant owner who one day decided to walk home from a friend's house, seeing as she lived only a block away. Several people offered her a ride home, but she refused. She was seen leaving the party in the early hours of the morning. However, the next time she would be seen, she wouldn't be alive. The next morning, a couple walking in the woods discovered her body. She was supposedly torn apart, with the couple instantly calling the police. Inside the mouth of Megumi was a playing card, the Jack of Spades, which had the word Alice written on it. At the scene there was absolutely no prints discovered, only vomit, which the woman from the couple admitted was hers. The next victim was said to be Yamane Akio. He was a known singer in a band who was abducted from his apartment on February 11, 2001. His bandmates were the last to see him alive, with a missing persons report being filed within days. On the home security footage, a hooded figure was seen entering through a side door and leaving with a large garbage bag that bulged strangely. The person in the recording was never found or identified, but it is believed to be the same killer because, like last time, at the scene of the crime an Alice card was discovered, a king of diamonds clutched in his hands. However, in a bizarre turn of events in 2005, a Spanish serial killer was jailed for the murder of 6 people, and it was said that he would leave playing cards on the corpses of each victim as well. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Cropsey. Now, this legend is incredibly bizarre because it ultimately turned out to be true, and there is nothing scarier than a true urban legend. Cropsey began as an urban legend, the boogeyman of Staten Island in New York City. It was rumored that this was a homicidal madman, a person who had escaped from a mental hospital who had a hook for a hand. He was said to hunt down children, drag them back to his tunnel system which lay under an abandoned hospital, and then kill them. Parents would use Cropsey to frighten their children into being good and staying close to home. He could be anywhere, so you better behave. However, parents didn't think too much of it because after all, Cropsey was just a mere legend, right? The legend continued to spiral, with the story even being turned into a movie in the 1980s called The Burning, which follows a man named George Cropsey who goes insane after a prank leaves him horribly disfigured. However, things went from bad to worse in Staten Island when Cropsey became a reality. The boogeyman came to life in the form of Andre Rand, a homicidal madman. Rand worked as a janitor at the Willowbrook School on Staten Island, a place which was said to be horrifically cruel to its students. The school was built as a respite for children with disabilities. However, after it was revealed to be a living hell, it would close its doors in 1987. After its closure, janitor Andre Rand would continue living on the grounds and was suspected of kidnapping several children. However, despite this never being proven to be true, he was found guilty of the crime, specifically one kidnapping in 1988 and one again in 2004. The legend became so infamous across the state that a movie was made about the story and Andre Rand, simply called Cropsey. Coming in at number 5, Ghost Taxi. Back in 2011, Japan was struck by a 9.0 to 9.1 magnitude earthquake. It was the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in Japan and the 4th most powerful earthquake in the world since modern record keeping began in 1900. The earthquake triggered powerful tsunami waves that may have reached heights up to 40.5 meters, which is absolutely terrifying. Now, a few years after this catastrophic event, stories of ghosts, specifically ghost taxis, began circulating in areas that were directly affected by the tsunami. However, this isn't new. According to reports, many Tokyoites have been telling stories about spectral passengers since way back when. One common legend is of pedestrians hailing down taxis and asking to be taken to Ayama Cemetery. When they arrive, the driver tells them the price and turns around to collect the fare, but there's no one in the back seat. Very spooky. Now, this legend may have some merit. As it turns out, the opening of the Chiada line in the late 1960s brought on some interesting problems as it ran directly under the cemetery. Now, the legend goes that some of these souls got lost on the trains, and they're attempting to get back home via these ghost taxis. It's actually pretty sad. Coming in at number 4, the Regina of Akasaka Road. This is a legend popular among students who have taken a history class nearby Sophia University. Kino Kunai Saka is a hill running past Akasaka Palace towards Akasaka stations, and serves as the setting for this dark and haunting legend. I quote, "A man hears wailing while walking down the slope at night, and sees a beautiful girl, dressed as if she is from a wealthy family, weeping on the banks of the moat. The man stops to ask her if she's okay and to console her, but the girl continues to weep, while hiding her face behind one of the long sleeves of her kimono. While he keeps on pleading with the girl to stop crying, she slowly rises up with her back turned to him, and then turns towards him and wipes her face with her hands, as if to wipe away tears. But it turns out she has no face, just a blank slate where eyes, nose and mouth should be. The man screams in fear and runs up the hill as fast as he can, away from the scene, not stopping to look back. He spots a lantern far up the road. Exalted, he runs towards it, although it turns out to be a lonely sober cellar rather than a dwelling. Upon reaching the cellar, he drops to the floor and breathlessly tries to explain what he just saw. The sober seller replies, rather unsympathetically, "Was it something like this?" and waves a hand across his face, after which all his features disappear, and the entire area becomes dark. Now, there is a name for these faceless creatures. They are referred to as Nopero Bo, or faceless ghost, which are Japanese yokai that look like a human but have no face at all. They are primarily known for frightening humans, but are usually otherwise harmless. They will appear at first as ordinary people before causing their features to disappear. Coming in at number 3, Yotsuya Kaiden. Yotsuya Kaiden is a haunting story of Oiwa and Tamiya Lemon, and is about betrayal, murder and ghostly revenge, making it one of Japan's and Tokyo's most famous ghost stories of all time. The legend itself is based loosely on 2 historical characters, with it depicting a woman, Oiwa, who is gradually poisoned by her husband due to the fact that she is having an extramarital affair. It is said that he presents the poison to her via face cream, which slowly eats away at her face, resulting in her having a lopsided and drooping appearance. Now, here's where the legend varies depending on which version of the story you are hearing, but it is said that Oiwa either accidentally cuts her throat and curses Tamiya's name while dying, or she is killed by Tamiya himself, or even dies of natural causes. Regardless of the cause of death, she comes back to haunt him when he marries the woman he had an affair with. It is also stated that when Tamiya weds his new wife, he lifts up the veil of his new bride. Oiwa's face appears instead. In shock and out of fear, he attacks her with his sword, halting the apparitions, but ultimately revealing that he has just killed his new bride. It is said that this may be based on 2 real-life murders, ultimately combining fact and fiction. The first involved 2 servants who had murdered their respective masters. They were caught and executed on the same day. The second murder was from a samurai who discovered his concubine was having an affair with a servant. The samurai had the faithless concubine and servant nailed to a wooden board and thrown into the Kanda River. Coming in at number 2, Akamanto/Red Cape. Akamanto, or the Red Cape, is a Japanese urban legend about a masked spirit who wears a red cloak, and who is said to appear to people using toilets in public or school bathrooms. Accounts of course vary, but one consistent element of the story is that the spirit will ask the person in the bathroom a question. In some versions, he will ask if they want red paper or blue paper, though other versions state a red cloak or a blue cloak, or a red cape or a blue cape. Regardless of what it is always blue or red, and regardless of the colour, no matter what option is selected, the person will always be killed. Specifically, if the person chooses the red option, they will be lacerated in such a manner that their body will be drenched in their own blood. Lovely. If the person chooses the blue option, the consequences range from that of the person being strangled to all of the person's blood being drained from their body. So what you must do is ignore the spirit, run away, or reject both options in order to survive. However, if an individual attempts to outsmart Akamanto by asking for a different colour of cloak or cape, it is said that they will be dragged to an underworld or hell as a result. Author and folklorist Matthew Meyer has stated that the Akamanto has been recorded as a schoolyard rumour since the 1930s. Also, more recently in the 2003 video game Castlevania Area of Sorrow, an enemy is featured known as Killer Mantle, which may have been based on the Akamanto legend. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Curse of Masakado. Taira no Masakado was a samurai in Japan who led one of the largest insurgent forces in the period against the central government of Kyoto. In 939, during the Heian period of Japanese history, Masakado led a minor rebellion which began when Masakado led an attack on the outpost of the central government in Hitachi province, capturing the governor. This resulted in Masakado becoming the new emperor. Over the centuries, Masakado became a demigod of sorts to the locals, with some even feeling the need to appease his malevolent spirit. Masakado ultimately met his end in a rather grisly manner, decapitated. His bodiless head oddly enough managed to be preserved remarkably well until it was eventually buried. Now his grave lies in Tokyo near the Otemachi subway station, and it is said that removing or relocating it has been proven incredibly difficult, with many attempts resulting in those being plagued by misfortune. When the nearby Ministry of Finance tried to level the hill after 1923, 14 workers related to the project started dropping dead like flies from accidents or other bizarre incidents. It is said that the curse still exists to this day, with various stories of people becoming ill or dying after the shrine had been messed with. People have learned their lesson though and rarely touch it. It's even said that desks inside the buildings around the shrine are placed so as to not make anyone sit with their back to Masakado. In at number 5 we have Puchin. The Puchin hail from southern Chile and is a creature from Mapuche mythology and Choloto mythology. The Puchin is described as a shape-shifting creature highly feared that can instantly change into animal form wherever it so desires. Throughout different stories it has often been described as a gigantic flying snake which produces strange whistling sounds, while its gaze could paralyze any victim it chooses, kind of like Medusa in that way, and permit it to suck its blood. In Chile the word Puchin also designates to the common vampire bat, so some cryptozoologists believe that common vampire bat is the origin of the legend. However, some believe that the Puchin could be related to the chupacabra, something we'll be discussing later on. Spoiler alert. It is said that the only people who can defeat the Puchin are Mapuche medicine women. That was a mouthful. In at number 4 we have duendes. A duende, for those who don't know, is a creature from South America that originated from the phrase possessor of a house and was originally conceptualized as a mischievous spirit inhabiting a home. Now duendes appear to pop up in many cultures around the world. In Portugal the word is used to describe beings of a small stature wearing big hats whistling a mystical song while walking in the forest. It is said that they lure young girls and boys to the forest, causing them to lose their way home. However, in Latin America this differs slightly. Duendes are believed to be the helpers of people who got lost in the forest so they could find their way home. They are also known to be gnome-like creatures who live inside the walls of homes, especially the bedroom walls of young children. As you can tell, the legend differs from region to region, some believing they are the souls of infants who died before they could be baptized. Others simply portray them as malevolent spirits that hide in homes and wreak havoc. Regardless of that, they are nasty little suckers who cause problems wherever they go. Coming in at number 3, El Chupacabra. Also known as the Chupacabra, this is a goat sucker, a legendary creature that was first reported back in the mid-90s. The name itself comes from the animal's reported habit of attacking and drinking the blood of livestock, including goats. Now there is actually said to be 2 kinds of Chupacabra. One is a reptilian kind, the true Chupacabra, and a canine kind, who are also called blue dogs. The first known sightings and attacks occurred back in March of 1995 in Puerto Rico. 8 sheep were found dead, each drained of blood. Investigators found 3 strange puncture wounds in the chest of the animal. A few months later in August, an eyewitness, Madeline Tolentino, reported seeing the creature in the town of Canovanas, when as many as 150 farm animals and pets were reportedly killed by the creature. Jumping forward to 1975, similar killings in the town of Mocha were attributed to the vampire of Mocha. It was initially believed that these acts were committed by a satanic cult, but later more killings were reported around the island, and many farms reported loss of animal life. Each of the animals were reported to have had their body bled dry through a series of small incisions. Now, like I mentioned before, the most common description of the Chupacabra is that of a reptile-like creature, said to have leathery or scaly greenish-grey skin, and sharp spines or quills running down its back. The other popular description is that of a strange breed of wild dog. It is described as being hairless and has a pronounced spinal ridge, unusually pronounced eye sockets, fangs, and even claws. In at number 2, La Llorona. Hailing from Hispanic folklore, La Llorona, which I'm pronouncing correctly now after you guys yelled at me in a previous video, is also known as the Wailing Woman or even the Crier. This is a legend about a woman who drowned her children in a lake and now mourns their deaths for eternity, roaming South America as a ghost or apparition. The story itself goes as follows. The woman was unloved by her husband and one day she caught him with another woman. So as revenge she drowned her sons in a river in grief and anger, and then drowned herself after she realized what she did. She was ultimately refused entry into heaven, for obvious reasons, unless she found the souls of her 2 sons. So now legend states that she roams the earth, hunting for the souls of her sons, with her cries and wails luring in innocent victims. La Llorona kidnaps wandering children at night, mistaking them for her own. Folks who have claimed to have seen her say that she appears at night or in the late evening by rivers or lakes, wearing a white gown with a veil, and some believe that if you hear the cries of La Llorona you are marked for death. Now, one particular encounter went as follows. A boy and his family were sitting near a creek between Mora and Guadalajara in New Mexico when they saw the form of a tall, thin woman. She seemed to float over the water and end up the hill out of sight until returning a little later closer to them. The family had suspicions that she was La Llorona, so they went to the shore to see if there were footprints, and there were none. Creepy stuff. More interesting still, the earliest reference to La Llorona was actually in a sonnet written by Mexican poet Manuel Carpio in the late 1800s, where he identifies her as the ghost of a woman who was drowned by her husband. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have El Silbon. Hailing from Colombia as well as Venezuela, El Silbon, also known as the Whistler, is a legendary figure described as a lost soul. This tale originated in the 19th century, with the Whistler being described as the harbinger of death. According to the legend, a son kills his father. After he returns home to find his father attacking his mother. This angered the boy, resulting in him killing his father. Another version is a tad more disconcerting and states that the son was a spoiled brat, and on one afternoon he demanded that his father hunt for a deer, his favourite meal. However, when his father did not find any deer and instead returned empty-handed, his son killed him and cut out his heart, cooking them for dinner. Following this, a mother grabbed the boy's grandfather, who then tied the boy to a tree and unleashed a vicious dog on him. As this was happening, his mother put a curse on the boy, which ultimately condemned him to wander the plains as a ghost, carrying a sack of bones on his back. Some versions of the story state that these bones are of his father, while others state that these are the bones of his victims. Now, the Whistler is said to have a characteristic whistle that resembles the musical notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B in that order. It is said that when the whistling sounds close, there's no danger, but if the whistling is far away, it means the whistler is nearby. Very confusing, I know. It is also stated that hearing the whistler foretells one's own death, and in this situation the only thing that can save the victims is the sound of a barking dog. Many people from Venezuela have said that they have spotted the whistler, primarily in the summer. However, it is mainly on rainy days that the whistler wanders, hungry for death and eager to punish drunkards, womanizers, or even innocent victims. It is said that the whistler will suck the alcohol out of drunkards through their navel when it finds them alone, and it tears womanizers to pieces, removes their bones, and puts them in the sack where it keeps the remains of its father. Lovely stuff.
Number 5, we've got sewer alligators. Iconic. I think New York's sewer alligators might have been one of the first urban legends I was familiar with as a kid. Showed up as a gag in a show I was watching or something. But it's a myth that doesn't seem to disappear. Hell, it even has an incarnation in one of New York's most famous pieces of media, Spider-Man. The lizard, anyone? There's something about the possibility of gigantic carnivores living in the New York City sewer system that has captured the imaginations of folks everywhere. Unfortunately, it's a story that begins with irresponsible pet ownership. Back in the early 20th century, plenty of posh people were looking for exotic pets to bring home with them. Why you would want an alligator in your penthouse is beyond me, but the rich and frivolous thought this was a smashing idea. Now, we all know this is a bad call, but hindsight wasn't quite a thing yet back then. So these folks brought baby alligators home and made cooing noises at their tiny green pals. However, they don't stay tiny and cute forever, so when these alligators became problematic, it was common for their owners to ditch them in any way they could. Some chose to flush them, but it's likely that they were too big at that point to fit down the pipes. This resulted in many being tossed down into the sewers at ground level. The legend says that these gators managed to do quite well for themselves in the dank tunnels, feasting on rats, growing up, and finding other alligators to have little alligator sewer babies with. This all came to a head in 1935 when the Times ran an article headlined, "Alligator Found in Uptown Sewer." A bunch of folks had located and killed an 8-footer out near the Harlem River, giving credence to the rumors. From there, the legend was cemented into city lore. The actual probability of alligators thriving in the sewers is next to none, but the believers keep on believing. Coming in at number 4, we've got Montauk Mind Control. SCP fans might recognize that name, Montauk. It's a hamlet at the far east end of Long Island. Because of this, it can be interpreted as the end, which kind of makes sense in that context. Stranger Things fans might have their ears perked up right now too, as rumors surrounding this village at the end of the island are bases for some parts of the show. There's an old military base out there known as Camp Hero. It's been shut down for a while, but there are whispers of some sinister stuff happening way back when. All sorts of top secret classified experiments are said to have occurred from the 60s through the 80s. The kind of stuff that would never go public because it's pretty messed up. It's almost sci-fi inspired, to be honest. Being at the end of the island lent them a fair deal of privacy, which meant the folks at the base could get up to all sorts of trouble. The big one that folks talk about has to be psychic experiments. Of course, experimenting on adults is no good. They're already fully developed and likely haven't exercised their psychic abilities. It's rumored that children were kidnapped and brought in and forced to undergo psychic experiments. They were put through all sorts of extreme tests and trials to see if they could unlock their hidden potential. Was it to create a new type of human weapon? Could it have been for the sake of espionage? Did anything really come of it? It really does smack of Stranger Things, doesn't it? An electrical engineer that claims to have worked at the site says they had alien technology there, which allowed them to turn kids into psychic warriors, which is a lot to claim, especially as it opens up the possibility of alien contact. These days, you can visit Camp Hero yourself whenever you want, as it's been converted into a state park. So maybe go and see if you can sense anything, or maybe even find some alien relics. Coming in at number 3, we've got the Empire State Bermuda Triangle. You're all familiar with the actual Bermuda Triangle, right? You know, the mystical portion of ocean between Miami, San Juan, and Bermuda that supposedly disappears ships, planes, and anything else that passes through? Well, apparently there's a spot like that in New York, sort of. If you ask around long enough, you might hear the tale of the Midtown Bermuda Triangle. In 2008, folks started noticing something odd. All sorts of cars would die for seemingly no reason and refuse to start back up again. It happened so often that people started looking for reasons why. Someone made the observation that all of these shutdowns seemed to be happening within 5 blocks of the Empire State Building. Mechanics got used to driving out, towing the dead cars a few blocks, and having them work perfectly once again. There are all sorts of theories as to why this happens, but the prevailing idea is that radio signals coming from the Empire State Building's broadcast tower were causing some sort of interference. Maybe they were inadvertently screwing with car alarm systems, stopping them from starting. However, this problem seems to have solved itself without anyone really addressing what was going on. So, was there a mysterious dead zone around the Empire State Building, or were folks just reading too far into their car troubles? Coming in at number 2, we've got mole people. We started with some underground reptiles, now let's get to some mammals. Humanoid mammals. Deep below the city, among the many subway tunnels and sewer systems, lives a city of people not accustomed to sunlight. Mole people. Well, probably not actual mole people, it's just a nickname they all got for living underground. In all likelihood, there are plenty of people living under New York. There are over 700 miles of subway tracks, plenty of which are closed off. So there's lots of space to set up a subterranean life. Rumors of these people living below the surface date back to the 1800s when the subway was first being built. The city had done its best to prevent people from settling in under there, but that's much easier said than done. Often subway construction gets delayed when workers come face to face with some of the tunnel dwellers. If someone was trying to run a train through your house, you'd be unwilling to move too. And finally, at number 1, we've got Cropsey. Oh, now this one is spooky. A legend among Staten Island youth, Cropsey is a figure shrouded in mystery. Some say that he was a respected member of the community that went mad after his son died. Others claim that he was admitted into a mental institution, became a janitor, and then started to kill. The origin story changes from person to person, but his actions do not. Cropsey kidnaps and kills children. He's the Staten Island boogeyman. Summer camps and island tours galore love to scare the daylights out of folks by telling them the tale of the killer on the loose. There's even a slasher movie from the 80s that features a Cropsey character. It's called The Burning. But get this, the legend might actually be true. Sure, he's not around anymore, but it turns out there really was a mad janitor who kidnapped and killed children. Andre Rand worked at Willowbrook, a now defunct mental institution on the island. In 1987, Rand was convicted of kidnapping and murder and racked up more charges later on. Did he inspire the legend, or was he inspired by it? We may never know. Rand is currently serving 2 sentences of 25 to life, but it's doubtful he's getting out. There's a fascinating and freaky documentary about the story of Cropsey that came out in 2009 that investigates the events surrounding the legend. Right on. The concrete jungle seems a little more cursed than before, doesn't it? Rent prices aren't the only scary thing out there. So what do you think? Have you heard of all these legends? Are there any big ones that I left out? Do you think the mole people ever made friends with a sewer alligator? Coming in at number 5, we've got the peace picture. I love this story. Honestly, I had no idea that it came from Korea either. When I worked as a camp counselor, I would tell this on night hikes all the time, and let me tell you, it really scared some campers. There are a few different versions with different main characters and different setup scenarios, but the meat and potatoes all pretty much stay the same. Alright, so the legend goes a little something like this. A middle schooler is biking home with his friends and they come to a forest path. Our main character lives through the woods and his pals take a different route home. So the group splits up and the young lad cycles through the trees. As he's going along, something catches his eye. There's a Polaroid picture lying face down at the foot of a tree. He pulls off the path, hops off his bike, and notices that there's a broken bicycle behind the tree. Picking up the photo, he sees a cute girl smiling at the camera, flashing the peace sign. You know the one. He really likes the picture, so he pockets it and heads home. That night, the boy feels an overwhelming urge to look out the window. When he does, he notices a young girl standing in his yard, facing away from him. He calls out to her, but she doesn't react. Feeling strange, he heads downstairs and walks into the yard, but the girl is nowhere to be seen. The next day, he shows his friends the picture and tells them the story of the girl in his yard, but none of them seem to recognize her. They go about their day at school, and then it's time to go home. On the ride home, the boy keeps an eye out for the girl about town, but doesn't see anyone resembling her. He and his friends make it to the woods again and split up. Distracted, the boy pedals his way through the flora and fauna. Suddenly, he catches a glimpse of someone behind a tree and cranes his neck to see if it could be her. Unfortunately, this causes him to lose his focus and crash. He doesn't survive. Weeks later, another kid is wandering through the woods. They see a Polaroid photograph lying in the decomposing leaves. Picking the picture up, they see a really cute girl holding up 3 fingers. Thinking it's a nice photo, they pocket it and head right along. Creepy, right? There are many variants, with car wrecks instead of bike crashes and grown men instead of school children, but the peace sign evolving into a 3 with another victim stays the same. Coming in at number 4, we've got virgin ghosts. It's every frat boy from the 80s worst nightmare, dying a virgin. Apparently this fear crosses cultures too. Known in Korea as the Chonyo-guishin, they can be found all over the place. Folks say that you might run into a virgin ghost in abandoned buildings, hospitals, schools, bathrooms, cemeteries, and forests. So basically, anywhere you might have found a living virgin. They're characterized by their long dark hair that completely covers their face, and they're always wearing white clothing. Look behind that hair and you'll notice they look pretty bummed too. I suppose that comes with the title, huh? People say you'll know you're near one when the temperature drops suddenly and the wind changes direction. Chills are a common symptom too, but those kinda come with the previous 2. In Confucian Korean culture, it was a woman's role to serve her father, husband, and sons. If someone died before doing these things, she would be cursed to wander the earth forever. So if a woman was to die a virgin, she would become a Chonyo-guishin. This comes with a fair deal of bitterness. Often, these ghosts will wander around the place where their former family lived, doing their best to cause problems for their good old relatives. Apparently, erecting, pardon the pun, phallic statues could calm an angry virgin ghost down. This doesn't work, or if town council won't approve a long hard statue, you can always try to introduce the ghost to an equally single male. The male virgin ghost, or the Chonggak-guishin, is always looking for someone to marry to put their soul to rest. So if you find one virgin ghost, you'd best get to work finding another. Coming in at number 3, we've got dreaming of dead family. You would think that seeing a dead family member might be nice. You know, maybe they're here to give you some advice or warn you of impending danger, or maybe they're just showing up because they miss you. Aww. However, there's a South Korean urban legend that says dreaming of a dead loved one is bad news. Do your best to resist their lovely charm, alright? It's said that if you dream of a dead family member or friend, they're going to try and steal your soul. They'll call you towards them, and if you head on down and give them a hug, it's game over. This is especially common near water, apparently. If these dreams persist, it's best to look into why they're happening. It's likely that whoever's calling out to you thinks that you owe them something, or you're holding on to one of their belongings. To figure out for sure, people advise heading out to wherever they're buried to pay respects. That should take care of the potentially soul-stealing dreams, and if not, well, I don't know what to tell you. Keep avoiding hugs, I guess. Coming in at number 2, we've got dog-human hybrids. Stories of people hearing disembodied voices while walking alone have been around pretty much forever, but this particular legend explains the mysterious phenomenon in a pretty creepy way. Around the 1970s, all sorts of folks started telling tall tales of finding truly disturbing creatures late at night. While strolling along, they hear a voice. They look up, they look down, they look left, they look right, and nobody's around, so they resume walking, but the voice calls out again. It's talking to them. A little paranoid now, the person checks behind them and looks to see if anyone is leaning out of a window or something. No dice. Then a little dog runs up to them. Oh, what a cute little dog, they think. But then it speaks using language. And the person gets a good look at the 4-legged creature, and oh god, it's got a human face. Anyone with unsoiled trousers at that point is a champion. These chimeric abominations are apparently quite common in Japanese and Korean folklore. It's said that someone who lives a sinful life will end up reincarnated as a half-dog, half-human monstrosity. Like, it would be cool to live the carefree life of a dog, but definitely not with a human head and intelligence. but considering my sinful modern lifestyle, I'm destined to become a dog man. What's a good name for one of those? And finally at number 1, we've got sesame seeds. I know what you're thinking. Keegan, you must be losing it. Sesame seeds aren't an urban legend, they're an edible plant byproduct, delicious on bagels and breads. But you see, I know sesame seeds are real. But there are plenty of legends concerning them in Korea. Remember when I warned all the trypophobes to skedaddle? Well, this is why. There are a few different stories about the ill effects of sesame seeds. One concerns a young woman taking a rejuvenating sesame seed bath. She learns of a lovely new skin treatment where you pour sesame seeds into your bath water. Supposedly this does wonders, leaving you extra youthful and glowing with super clean pores. So the woman decides to give it a try. She fills the tub, tosses in the seeds, and steps into the bath. Her mother, knowing how excited her daughter was to try this treatment, begins to worry after she doesn't come out of the bathroom for an hour. She knocks on the door but gets no answer. Fearing the worst, the mother forces the door open and stumbles in. Her daughter's unconscious in the tub with sesame seeds stuck on all of her grotesquely open pores. The seeds have taken root in her skin. Oh, yuck. The alternate telling of this tale involves sesame seed skin cream with similar terrifying results. I suppose the pimple-popping crowd might find this fascinating, but for most folks, this is hideously upsetting. Usually the victim in this sesame seed disaster is able to have all the seeds removed, but it is a time-consuming and painful process. However, leave the seeds too long and you might end up as a human planter. Imagine the roots growing deeper and deeper into your flesh. It's kind of like that watermelon seed urban legend where if you swallow a seed, you'll grow one of the bulbous fruits in your stomach. And there you have it. It's a scary world out there, especially when you do your research. Hopefully none of these ruin your next barbecue.
In at number 5 we have Space Mountain. There are a surprising amount of urban legends surrounding this ride at Disney World, which is odd. It is just a ride after all, right? Nothing strange about it. According to legend, one rider was decapitated while on Space Mountain because he supposedly stood up while riding. What an idiot. Now this is only a little bit true. There was a decapitation, but it was on a test dummy, not a real person. No person has ever been killed while riding Space Mountain. However, there is another dark legend that surrounds this ride. According to legend, on Space Mountain you can find Mr. One-Way. Some accounts describe Mr. One-Way as a red-haired man with a red face, with stories stating that he hangs out in the line for Space Mountain. But this differs depending on who you ask. According to video footage, Mr. One-Way will sometimes get onto the ride with other passengers, grabbing an available seat. However, it is said that he disappears right before you reach the final tunnel at the end of the ride. On top of that, there is supposedly a second ghost called Disco Debbie, who is also said to haunt Space Mountain, and according to some riders, she glows in the dark. Very coat.
Coming in at number 5, we've got boneless boys. You may be familiar with the claim that vampires are shapeshifters. Depending on who you ask and what vampires they're familiar with, you'll get all sorts of different stories about men who turn into beasts. Bats are a popular figure, but there are also tales of cats, dogs, wolves, rats, and more. Hell, if you've seen Dracula 3D, you'll know that some might even transform into gigantic praying mantises and scuttle up the stairs to kill your dad. They're quite versatile vampires. But you might not know about another type of shapeshifting some folks say they have. One that makes them even more versatile than any beastly form could ever hope to be. That's right, I'm talking about the boneless vampire. What do you mean boneless? Well, I mean they literally have no bones. Now, I can't prove this, but tell me, have you ever seen a vampire's skeleton? Whenever they die, whether it be by stake or by fire, they disintegrate into dust or other similar vampire particles, right? They leave no bones behind because there are no bones. It's a revelation, I know. But they can still walk and talk like any other humanoid, but with the added benefit of vampire powers. Plus, this bonelessness means they're fantastically flexible, which works wonders in their seductive activities and their sneaking into homes to drink blood. Even if you lock your abode up tight, a vampire can contort its boneless form and make it through the tiniest of cracks. Keyholes? Not just for keys anymore. I bet you didn't expect me to lead with a legend like that, now did ya? Hopefully that sets the tone. Coming in at number 4, we've got the Sukuyan. A lot of folks look to European legends to find out about vampires, but they really do exist all around the world. By different names, sure, but they still suck blood and pass for people. One such fascinating bloodsucker is the Sukuyan from Jamaica. The creature takes on the form of a shriveled old lady by day. You might even see her at the market and offer her a helping hand. But if you knew what she did by moonlight, you'd take your helping hands elsewhere. A Sukuyan will shed her skin at night, becoming a blood blood-drinking fireball. This skinless apparition can then float around the community, drinking the blood of anyone unfortunate enough to become a target. After a long night of draining folks of their vital essences, the fireball returns home to its discarded skin. It can then don the loose organ like a suit and return to life as an old lady. With every use, the skin becomes more and more wrinkly, wear and tear and all that jazz. Usually the Sukuyant will do a pretty good job of hiding her skin after she's freed for the night because it's left pretty vulnerable. While flying around, nothing can really be done to protect the skin. So if you ever find some skin, do your best to mess with it. Some folks say that if you salt or pepper it, it'll cause her to experience extreme burning and itching upon return. Another thing you can do to combat a Sukuyant is scatter rice or salt on your doorstep. It won't protect anyone's blood, but it'll slow the monster down. Like so many other mythical demons, if it comes across a smattering of rice or salt, she'll be compelled to hunker down and count every last grain before leaving. This tends to take a while, leaving the beast exposed and distracted. Take that opportunity to beat her to death or toss her in a vat of boiling oil. It might seem cruel to do that to what looks like an old lady, but hey, you gotta save your blood somehow. Coming in at number 3, we've got vampire pumpkins. Legends are weird, alright? And this one's no exception. I don't quite understand how this came to be a common conception, but it's well documented by the ethnologist Tadimir Vukanovich. Apparently, there was a long-standing belief in the Balkans that if you left a pumpkin or watermelon out for more than 10 days, it would become a vampire. That's right, the gourds would transform into humanoid bloodsuckers. I think I understand Akira Toriyama's vampire comic a little better now. Imagine that, leaving a pumpkin on your stoop for a solid fortnight after Halloween and waking up to an empty yard. Most folks would assume some vandals made off with it, planning to smash it with baseball bats or throw it off a building. But no, it actually just turned into a vampire and now you're gonna get seduced and bit. Great. If this is true, folks better get right on their composting habits. It's similar to the belief that any given object left outside overnight during a full moon will become a vampire. I think this legend originates from people being dumb with their belongings, but I might just be reaching. You can be sure that your produce is about to make a change if a drop of blood appears on its skin. Oh, and the pumpkin vampires can change back into pumpkins, so even if it doesn't disappear, you can be the proud owner of some cannibalistic vegetables. Coming in at number 2, we've got Jiangxi. Let's take a trip to China this time and learn about some of their bloody beasts. A popular one is the hopping vampire, also known as the Jiangxi. Usually appearing as a stiff corpse dressed in Qing Dynasty clothing, these undead beings hop around looking for life force to drain. Life force isn't specifically blood in this case, but the two line up just fine. They spring to and fro during the night, hoping to come across some hapless folks. And just like vampires from other cultures, they spend the day locked up in dark places like coffins and caves. They hop because they're corpses. Rigor mortis has long since set in, making it impossible for them to bend their limbs. So instead of walking, running, or any other sort of human locomotion, they can hop around as best they can. They're also an odd green-white tint, frequently attributed to mold from being buried so long. These vampires are a little less sexy than a lot of the other ones. There are a few ways to survive an encounter with the Jiangxi. You can write a spell in chicken's blood on a yellow piece of paper and stick it to their forehead. Or you can use a sword forged from Chinese coins that has been charged under moonlight. Apparently throwing sticky rice at one will draw the evil out. Maybe they were just hungry. Oh, and connecting this to the boneless bits, although I don't know if that really applies here, conventional wisdom says that a piece of wood can be installed at the bottom of a door to prevent Jiangxi from entering. It's always fun to connect those dots. And finally, at number 1, we've got the Blood Countess. When discussing the origins of vampires, many folks look right to Vlad the Impaler. This Wallachian prince is more than likely the inspiration for Count Dracula's name, as he was a member of the Order of the Dragon. Being a member of this order gave him the surname Dracul, which is only one letter off from the name we know and fear today. But even though Vlad tended to be violent and steak happy, the real blood drainer was waiting in Hungary. Elizabeth Ballery was a countess well known for her brutal lifestyle. Legend says that she tortured and killed over 650 women throughout her life. In true vampiric fashion, she believed that bathing in blood of young girls would keep her young. She was going for a youthful appearance, not eternal life, but you can see how that might have influenced vampire lore. Ballery drained plenty of girls of their blood in order to keep herself young. This practice also seems to be a little more sadistic and fetishistic than Vlad's brutal display of slain enemies. Hold on, aren't some celebrities paying for young people blood infusions now? History has an eerie way of repeating itself, doesn't it? String up your garlic and bust out your mirrors. There are all sorts of additional vampire tidbits to fear now. What'd you think of the list? Did you know about all these vampire myths and legends? What's your favorite vampire fact? Would you let a vampire bite you if they promise not to kill you? Make sure you let me know down in the comments. Live.
Coming in at number 5, we have the expressionless. According to this very bizarre legend, a nameless woman arrived at the Cedars-Sinai Hospital back in June of 1972 wearing a bloodied white gown. Now, what set this woman apart from the rest of the patients in the hospital was that she had a mannequin-like appearance, yet moved fluently like any normal person. Her face was devoid of facial features, and on top of all of that, the woman had a kitten inside of her mouth, which she pulled out before collapsing to the ground. Now, she was quickly rushed into a room and prepped for sedation, with the staff opting to restrain her just in case. However, when they attempted to inject her, the woman immediately fought back. She then rose from the bed and revealed razor-sharp teeth that were seemingly impossible to fit into her mouth. She then attacked one of the doctors, sinking her teeth firmly into his neck, killing him quickly. When authorities arrived, they couldn't restrain her, with the woman killing everyone in the hospital, with only one nurse surviving the onslaught, dubbing the woman the Expressionless. Since that day, there has never been a sighting of her, perhaps because she isn't real. What I don't understand is why she had a kitten in her mouth. That is the most bizarre part of the entire thing. Now, the origin behind this legend, it was uploaded on the internet, appearing on creepypasta back in June of 2012. Coming in at number 4, we have Lavender Town Syndrome. This is a popular urban legend amongst gamers, specifically those who played Pokemon Red and Green in Japan. This legend began back in 1996 when there was an apparent peak in suicides and sickness in folks between the ages of 7 to 12 years old. Rumors began to spread that illness occurred in children who reached Lavender Town in Pokemon, with it being said that the town's theme music had extremely high-pitched frequencies that may have resulted in folks becoming sick or even taking their own lives. Due to this frequency, it is said that around 200 people took their own lives or developed illnesses and afflictions, with some complaining of severe headaches after listening to the music. The mass hysteria ultimately resulted in the programmers fixing the music to be at a lower frequency, and since then no complaints have been made. In Pokemon Gold, Silver and Crystal, the Lavender Town music was recomposed altogether to be happier, and the Pokemon Tower was demolished and replaced with the Kanto Radio Tower. The Lavender Town theme was also re-recorded for the 2017 Pokemon Go Halloween event. In at number 3, we have the disappearance of Ashley, Kansas. Now, this is a bizarre urban legend, but one of my favorites on this entire list. It is said that back in 1952, an anomalous incident occurred in the town of Ashley, Kansas. However, it should be noted that this isn't, nor has ever been, a real place. Sorry to burst your bubble. However, the legend states that back in 1952, an earthquake occurred in the middle of the night, resulting in strange happenings. Specifically, the town of Ashley, Kansas abruptly disappearing. When police went to investigate, they found nothing, only a smoldering burning fissure. It was said that the 679 residents of the town were missing. However, the search for them was called off after 12 days of searching. The legend also goes on to state that not long after, yet another earthquake occurred, and this time when the police went to investigate, the burning fissure was gone and the town was still nowhere to be seen. And that is all that is known about Ashley, Kansas, the town that supposedly disappeared overnight. Coming in at number 2, we have Slender Man. To quote the original Slender Man post on Something Awful, "We didn't want to go, we didn't want to kill them, but its persistent silence and outstretched arms horrified and comforted us at the same time." This is perhaps the most popular modern day legend on our list, with it crossing over into the mainstream with games and movies being made about this supernatural figure. Now, Slender Man originated as a creepypasta internet meme created by Something Awful forums user Eric Knudsen back in 2009. Slender is described as being incredibly tall, somewhere between 7 to 9 feet, as well as pale in complexion with an emaciated figure. He is sometimes portrayed with incomplete features such as empty eye sockets. He is also said to possess a handful of supernatural powers and abilities. He is said to be immortal, having lived for around 11,000 years without end, and any wounds inflicted on him instantly heal. Now, stories told about the supernatural character commonly feature him stalking, abducting, or traumatizing children. Now, outside of the internet, he has become an icon, with a prominent influence in popular culture, with video games being made about the figure, including Slender the 8 Pages and Slender the Arrival. However, things became very real with this legend back in 2014 when 2 girls attacked another girl and claimed to the courts that they did it for Slender Man, which is absolutely terrifying. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have the Russian sleep experiment. This urban legend emerged a few years back in 2010, so sorry to disappoint in advance, but this one is certainly not real, but that doesn't stop folks from speculating. Now, Now, the legend itself recounts a supposed experiment that took place in the late 1940s in a Soviet test facility. According to the legend, 5 prisoners were kept in a sealed gas chamber with a continually administered airborne stimulant, which kept them awake for 30 consecutive days. Now, the prisoners volunteered for the experiment under the false promise that they would be released after the 30 days. For the first few days of the experiment, the prisoners behaved normally, chatting with one another and even talking to researchers through the one-way glass. However, over the subsequent days, things quickly turned much darker. After 9 days, one of the prisoners began screaming uncontrollably for hours on end, while the other prisoner seemingly had no reaction to the odd outburst. The man ultimately screamed for so long that his vocal cords burst, which makes me feel physically sick. I know this isn't real, but the idea of that happening is disgusting. Not long after, a second prisoner began screaming, while the others prevented the researchers from looking in by pasting torn book pages to the windows with their own feces. A few more days passed and things went silent, and after 15 days, the researchers decided to turn off the stimulant and enter the room. What they found was absolutely disgusting. One of the prisoners was deceased, and the 4 remaining survivors had performed severe mutilation on themselves, tearing off their own flesh and removing their own organs.